let's review the conditions that I already made. This one is Barbarian Rage, and conditions have 4 areas. When I am not in condition, in rage in this case, when I am in rage, so here the actor is the person who is in rage, the character who is in rage, and here we have enemy when I am not in rage. So you can do something for the enemy character when this first character is not in rage. And second, you can do something for the enemy character when this character is in rage. The rule for this one is when in rage, character has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. Any weapon, Barbarian has resistance to all weapons in practice. How this works? We are changing this info resistances, and this is what I talked before. I created this resistances info and I use this resistance in another info. Do you remember that I already said this? I created 3 infos, empty infos, immunities, resistances, and vulnerabilities, just to be able to add resistance, vulnerability, and immunity to any rule. Now in the Barbarian, I am using this one. I am adding resistance here. We just need to add what kind of resistance for the damage kind it has. Let's remember what a damage kind is. Damage kind is this table that gives the damage kind. So now we can make rules for immunities, for vulnerabilities, and for resistances. In the condition rage, we can just add this to that variable. And now it's time to talk about the union operation. The union operation is one of the operations that can be done into multiple fields. I already talked about it, but I will say it again. We will get that set and add these 3 values. You can think of this kind of field as a set field, a group of damage kinds. Suppose that the resistance already is returning piercing. When I say union, it will do a mathematical set operation. Union mathematical set operation. In the last class, I talked about how each combination of stack slot and node operation is like a basket that we put things in and then do a stack operation on them. When we use a set operation like union, there is no choice of stack slot because set operations always accumulate things in the basket using union, and in the end we will use the node operation for the final result. Here we have a union operation, and union is fairly intuitive. With each rule that uses union, more and more things are added to the final set. So we can use union to add things to a set. And analogously, we can use the difference operation to remove things from a set. As an example of using the difference operation, suppose we have several rules that remove resistance instead of giving resistance. We would have a rule to remove piercing resistance and a rule to remove slashing resistance. For example, we will choose the difference operation at the node, but internally, criteria will do a union on the basket first, so that the basket would have both slashing and piercing, and then we would remove those 2 resistances from the final location using difference. This is done by criteria under the hood, and you just need to indicate that you want to use difference to remove those resistances. So let's review all the conditions. This is the rage condition, and this node adds bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing to this info resistances, which we already talked about, and this is used in the damage. So it's a union operation with 100 priority. Now, here we have a very interesting thing, that is, if it's an attack, and we have a global var here, attack ability, and if is an attack and it's attacking using the ability strength, then we have this condition, which is the rage damage. Barbarian rage damage. We have a table for barbarian who increases damage with class and level, and this damage is added to the damage value. But this is also an interesting example, because instead of adding something to the return of an info, just like we use it until now, this is adding at an input of an info. So we have this apply damage info that receives a parameter called damage value, and we are modifying that parameter, adding damage before the info will be called. So it's important to understand that when you use an input parameter here, just like damage value is an input parameter, this is done, is executed before the information is loaded. And this, since it uses the return of an information, is done evidently after the information is executed. In order to use global values here, these values have to be filled somewhere else, and they are filled in the different actions. In this case, since this is an attack, it was filled in attack infos. Let's look at this. This is the weapon attack information, and you may see that we have a global var here, weapon, which is being set here. The weapon is a parameter of this info, so we can safely set this parameter here before the action step. Also, we have a Boolean value is attack, which is set here, setting to true. This is important because if we don't have this here, this condition here, when the character is in rage, we will be added every time, this rage damage. But we want this to be added only when it's attacking with strength. Let's go back there, weapon attack here. So we set this variable, which is the weapon, and this variable, which is attack, is true. And also we have this third global var here, attack ability. Which ability is used for the attack? It's a strength, it is dexterity. In this case, this ability is tied to the weapon being melee or ranged. Here we have an excellent example of the before rules area being used. Before use rules area is an area of the actor input that, as the name implies, are executed just before merged infos and before resolution, but after input has been collected. So we can use input here, although this is only for filling global variables and local variables. Do not use this in place of resolution, because here the actor is not set, the enemy is not set. Here we get the weapon and use the inventory field to access the table field. Okay? So it's important to set global variables in the actions for them to be used inside rules or conditions. I will say this again. The only way that a condition or a rule has to know which action is being executed is using global vars, because you will remember that I said that conditions and rules are not linked to any action or any special action. They are linked to where they will be executed. For instance, each time someone calls the apply damage info, this will be executed. Of course, it's inside its if. So this is not tied to any action. This is important because the idea is the character can enter rage and do several actions. And this rage will do something for several actions. We have also this advantage. I created an info called advantage for abilities, and this is used when rolling dice to roll abilities. It's an union. I will add strength here. Again, you already know this concept. It's an empty info that it's used somewhere. In fact, this is used where we roll a die and we will get advantage. For those who doesn't know what advantage is rolling 2 dice and getting the best result. Okay? And disadvantage is rolling 2 dice and get the worst result. Next, we have the blinded condition, and the blinded condition gives disadvantage in the attack odds info when the character is blinded. Okay, this attack odds is called inside the attack information. And here we have an example for the enemy. The pen and paper rule says when someone is attacking a character that is blinded, he has advantage on that attack. And that's a good place to use this info bonus. Enemy when I'm blinded. When the enemy is attacking me because I am blinded, the enemy has advantage. And this is how you use this area. Although the condition is for the character, the enemy has a rule for him or for her. So this is the frightened condition. And now we have an interesting thing, that is conditions and rules. Because conditions are just like rules. They are executed at the same time. Conditions when something is on the character, and rules are executed when you put them inside criteria rules. We already have talked about that. And their modus operandi is the same, okay? We work in the same way. And I said all of this just to say conditions and rules can have input fields. In this input field here, we work in a very similar way to merged infos. This field will be merged with any field that is already on the action that you are doing at this moment. So we have a field here because the rule says, okay, you are frightened, but your fear source is in line of sight. I can obviously have this rule inside criteria. It's almost impossible to do that in a game. The correct way is asking a question in criteria. So the game master will input if this is true. And if this is true, we have a resolution area here, just like any other action step. In this resolution, we will do this thing. If this is true, remembering that we are frightened, okay, and the enemy is in the line of sight, then we have disadvantage for any ability check. And we also have disadvantage on any attack odd. So I have fear of that vampire, and then I do a strength check with difficulty. I do attack the vampire with difficulty. And this is how we implement that rule inside criteria. I know that I already told you this and how to use this, but I will review this because this is maybe somewhat confusing. You know, I have this disadvantage for abilities info here, and I have this advantage for ability info. Do you remember how this works? I will reveal it again. I will give you a hint. These infos are empty. They are placeholders for rules to change them. Let's look at where they are being used. So I have this action, ability check. And in this action, we have a roll. The actor will roll a die to check for the ability. And before this roll, I get a parameter. I have a parameter called rules odds, which will be advantage or disadvantage and so on. And I created an info called odds by ability, which has a parameter of the ability. This is strength, dex, con, etc. Okay, let's look at this info odds by ability. This info odds by ability return odds, return advantage or disadvantage or nothing. So now we are using the info advantage for abilities and the info disadvantage for ability. So remember, the advantage for abilities is a set. So if the ability belongs to that set, then it has advantage. all of this is also a set. And if he has disadvantage for abilities, he has disadvantage in the same sense. You may notice that he can have advantage and disadvantage for the same roll. This is valid. And when you have this both of conditions, then the roll is a single die. One cancels another. One cancels the other. Back to our ability check info, we have this D20 roll that receives our info that we just reviewed, odds by ability. So this will return a set of advantage, disadvantage, or empty. In the D20 roll, we use that information to roll a D20 or two D20s and to use sum, max, or min values. We have the grappled condition that says when I am grappled, my speed is 0. And we just use the info bonus and change the rule speed and set it to 0 and use the replace operation. And it's very important that we put this priority over all other priorities, because the character may have increase in or decreases in his speed set to my +10 if it's a monk, whatever. But if the character is grappled, his speed is 0 and point, okay? It doesn't matter what other rules say. So by putting the priority over other rules, we guarantee that the final speed will be 0. And we have the dead condition, which has an info can do actions, which is tied to every action. And dead characters tell no tales and do no actions. Also, we have a great priority for it. Now, the exhausted condition, it's an interesting one because it's a condition that has a level. Until now, we have dealt with conditions that are Boolean situations. Either we have that condition or we do not. But exhaustion has level of exhaustion. So when someone will set exhaustion, in fact, it will use the add or increase condition. But the idea is to increase conditions or decrease conditions. You can have condition level. For instance, I can have exhaustion level 0, exhaustion level 1, exhaustion level 2, and so on. If I have exhausted level 0, means that I am not exhausted. But if I have exhausted level 5, I am very exhausted. And in fact, if I have exhausted level 6, I am dead. So here, if the condition level exhausted is greater or equal 6, then we set the condition to that. And else, we will do several things based on the level of exhaustion. For instance, each roll reduction is reduced by the condition level multiplied by 2. If I have condition level 3, every D20 roll is D20 minus 6. We can use an add operation and invert the signal of the condition level. So if this is 3 versus 2 would be 6, and we will add minus 6 to the result of the D20 roll. You use the condition level node to retrieve the level of that particular condition. We have nodes to set condition level, to get condition level, and to increase and decrease conditions. We have this raise condition here and this lower condition here. This adds 1 or subtracts 1 for a particular condition. The other nodes are similar. We use the condition level to add also to this info bonus enemy roll, because we have 2 rolls for one for actors, one for enemies. It's almost the same. And the speed is reduced. This is a good example of the same info are being changed by this node and the grapple node. The grapple node sets it to 0 when it's grappled, and the exhausted node reduces it. But if the character is exhausted and grappled, the grappled will have priority. For the incapacitated, we just can do no actions. Okay, incapacitated characters do no actions. And the invisible one, this is interesting also, we have initiative advantage, so we change the initiative odds info. and it has advantage on attack odds, okay? But only if the enemy does not see invisibility. And if the enemy does not see invisibility, also the enemy has disadvantage in the else, of course, because if he sees invisibility, it has no disadvantage. But if it does not see visibility and I am invisible, then my enemy has disadvantage against me because I am invisible. If I am paralyzed, I can do no actions, I have 0 speed also, and I fail for saves of strength and dexterity. And if I am paralyzed, my enemy has advantage on attack odds. And this is interesting also, it uses the position of myself, the actor, and my enemy to see if he is less than 1 square 5 feet or 150 centimeters. Okay, remember that we can always put this here and we will translate to 150 automatically. So if my enemy, okay, if the distance between me and my enemy is less than 150, my enemy has automatic critical hit. The rule says that you need to be close to the character to do automatic critical hit. If I am petrified, I can do no actions. I have 0 speed. I fail for saves. And this is interesting. The rule says you have resistance to all damage. There are several ways to do that. I could have made a Boolean information, but since I already have info for resistances and I just looped to each damage kind, created a variable and passed that variable with all damage kinds to the resistance, so it will have resistance to everything. And last, my enemy, when I am petrified, has advantage on attack rolls. So it's interesting. I am easy to hit because I am petrified, but I am hard to destroy because I am petrified. I think it's a good rule. If I am poisoned, I have disadvantage on attack odds on attacks and disadvantage also on ability checks. And last, if I am prone, I have disadvantage to attack anyone. And my enemy, if my enemy is near me, it has advantage on attack and disadvantage if he is far, because I am standing on the ground. But the important point here, the bottom line, is when you create your infos and you put those infos in strategic places, these empty infos, you can use it everywhere. You notice that I am using this attack odd info in several places. Every time I have an advantage or disadvantage in an attack based on a rule, I just use this node and that's it. So it's becoming very simple to create rules. And this will be very important when we will implement spells and other special effects, and also monster special effects.